Welcome to Stylist Soul Tribe Conversations. I'm your host, Lisa Huff. Over the last 5 years, I've coached hundreds of hairstylists and beauty industry professionals, helping them work their dream schedules exclusively with their dream clientele and earn their dream income, all while fostering genuine connections and lifelong friendships inside the beauty industry. In this podcast, we dive deep into abundance, manifestation, business building strategies, and creating a life that you are truly proud of, both behind the chair and at home. Are you ready to embark on a journey of personal growth, success, and sisterhood? Then hit that subscribe button now and get ready to experience the pure magic of Stylist Soul Tribe Conversations. Hi friends, welcome back to Stylist Soul Tribe Conversations. Today I am joined by two connections, Mindi and Leslie, friends who co-host the Banyan Effect podcast, which explores topics such as not settling, discovering your purpose, cultivating a resilient mindset, leadership, and using life's challenges as stepping stones for growth, which is obviously right up my alley. Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
You're so welcome. So I got connected originally with Mindi through a mutual connection that we both have, Carissa Warren. She has been on the podcast before. Does she do your hair, Mindi, or how do you guys know each other?
Well, we actually know each other from mutual friends through high school. She's a little bit older than I. We didn't graduate together, but that's how I know her. I'm not technically one of her clients, although I do pop in sometimes for some insight and some help. I love the toppers, so I went in and had her do a topper consultation. And her and I think just have similar business mindset. And so she felt like we should connect as well because of the podcast. And
yes, Carissa told me that she had a friend who was a real estate agent, had this podcast, and wanted to ask some questions. What course did I take? What things like that have I done to bring my podcast to life? So Mindi and I hopped on a call about a month ago. I don't know either of these ladies very well at all, but when we were chatting about her podcast, their friendship, the topics they discuss on their podcast, I was like, why don't you guys just come on my podcast? So let's have a conversation. Like, I've listened into a few of their episodes, just get an idea of what they're talking about. And then, like I said, when I introduced them, the topics are very relevant. So why don't we, I think you guys have an interesting, surprising little duo, the connection that you guys have and the friendship that you guys have formed. So why don't you, one, so that people can learn voices, maybe Leslie, let's start with you since we've already chatted with Mindi a little bit, introduce who you are, a little bit of background, and then maybe share the friendship with Mindi and how this podcast came to life.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Leslie. I am in marketing, actually. So my full-time job is in marketing. I'm a senior level marketing executive, so I have a team underneath me. And so I spend a lot of time doing that. I live in the Madison, Wisconsin area, which is where Mindi and I met. Mindi and I actually met through our daughters. They both did competitive cheer together, and we haven't known each other that long, though you wouldn't think that when our families are together, because it seems like we've known each other forever. So we met through our daughters and cheer, and when Mindi and I started talking about business and life and just who we are as people, we started to realize that there's a lot of alignment between the way that we think and the way that we just tackle life. So it was very, very natural for us to be fast friends. And, our families since then have become completely integrated together. We actually recently built houses next to each other out in the country. So we shared chickens together.
That's precious.
Our families, I consider her kids extension of my kids and vice versa. So it's wonderful.
Love. And then Mindi, a little intro of who you are, what you do by trade, and then same thing, maybe when the idea of the podcast came to light.
Yeah, by trade, I'm a real estate agent. And so I'm also a marketer because you kind of have to be in that business. And I have my own business. I also have a team that I run. And so I love the idea of growing anything. When Leslie and I started, just having these really real, raw conversations, we just felt like they shouldn't be kept between us. Like, these were conversations that we feel like it would benefit many women and men. We've got male listeners that are some of our most loyal, but just other people that like just very raw topics. and real life, like as we're going through them type of things that we just want to share with the world and try to help other people go through and just feel like and know that they're normal for having these issues. And so that's kind of, I think, when we started having these conversations, we were just like, this is really good stuff. We're both driven. We're both Enneagram 3s. We love to achieve. And so it was this idea of a podcast and a book, and all of these ideas were birthed, and then real life kind of gets in the way with that. But
totally,
it's, that's kind of how it started. And what we're kind of fighting for right now is we're still working full-time, very full-time jobs.
Yeah. And so how long ago was the podcast originally started?
We started at the beginning of January. So it's been going
just under a year.
Yeah, just under a year. Yep.
Awesome. 9 months. Yeah. And then the Banyan Effect. Obviously, I've heard your guys' intro, so I know where that came from. But how did you guys come up with that name, and what does that mean to you?
It was actually, so Mindi and I was it February probably, took just a last minute trip down to Florida. The winters here in Wisconsin are brutal, and there's no sun and no motivation. So trying to start a podcast and dream really big when it's gloomy and dark out was hard. So we were like, let's just get out of here. Let's go down to Florida. Let's fly to Florida for an extended weekend and just let's think about this thing. And
well, the name actually, we came up with a name last November.
Okay, so before the podcast.
We locked ourselves in a cabin up in Oxford, an hour north, for a weekend, and we birthed an entire business plan in one weekend. And one thing that we said we couldn't do before, or one thing we had to do before we left, was come up with a name, because it's really hard to progress it with anything without a name. And so you want to share?
Yeah. So that trip down to Florida was, we went out for a walk, and there was one of the largest banyan tree in the continental United States is down in Fort Myers, Florida. And so we took a walk one morning through that tree, and it's enormous. And as we were walking through it, I think it really validated that name that we had come up with back in November, because you could see all of the different roots of the banyan tree, and they're all supporting one another, and they all sort of go back to the central place of the core root, but there's all of these other strong roots that help grow the banyan tree to get bigger and wider. And so we were like, it's so perfect in order for us to live our purpose, there's all of these different roots in our lives that we have to nourish and grow strong in order to grow as wide as we can and take up all of the space that we're created to, which is in the intro of our podcast.
It really is the perfect metaphor for these conversations you guys found yourself having. And it sounds like the basis of your friendship. So going back to Chris, and it's so interesting when people are like, hey, I think you should connect with this person. It's so random. They're not a hairstylist. They're not anybody, but it's just, there's a type of person, and you just kind of know when you find them. Clearly you guys had that. I am honored when people will say, I'd love to introduce you to this person. I just know you would click with them. There's just a type of mindset there, and that is a huge compliment hearing that. And you really know them when you see them, and then once you find them, it's just that feeling and that connection. So I'm so grateful to have you guys on to get to know both of you a little bit more. Just for the listeners, a little context. I was just kind of chatting with Mindi a month ago. She was just asking some questions about monetizing a podcast. When do you finally do that? I'm still looking for that secret, mystery to solve, because from my perspective, my podcast leads into my main thing, which is Stylist Soul Tribe, and it's more of a marketing tactic into that. But what you just said, Mindi, when you were introducing yourself about what you guys are fighting to, hold on to because life is so busy. I think it's probably fair to just call a passion project sometimes, right? Yeah. And isn't that even what you guys are talking about? And sometimes even what you were just saying before we hit record, Leslie, of you start to lose the magic of something really, really special when you get all these deadlines and guidelines and all these boxes that you get pushed into. And so I think that's a beautiful thing. And I hope you guys obviously continue to do that. I mean, fair to say that you can just call it a passion project for a little bit, and that's a beautiful thing and serves its own purpose, right?
Yeah. We're trying really hard to allow ourselves to do that. Though I think, like Mindi shared, we are both Enneagram 3s and want to achieve, and so want to turn it into this big thing. So I think it's a good testament to the message that we're sharing on our podcast too.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to relinquish control sometimes and just,
Mhm.
like you said, pour your passion into it and see where it goes.
Without these crazy expectations.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if the podcast is actually for us and not for our listeners. And it's the lessons that it's teaching us about, again, like not having everything in our life be attached to an award or a paycheck, or you know what I mean? Like being okay with just putting something out in the world because it's good and it's real and it doesn't necessarily provide anything in return other than just helping other people organically. And that's, I think, the lesson that we're currently learning. Like, okay, we need to release the reins
Or
and
even
not
truly just
push.
helping yourself, but having the bravery to just document it and throw it out there. And if it
Right.
ever finds
Yes.
someone that it's supposed to find, there's nothing wrong with that. I've been reading a book right now called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Have either of you ever heard of that? It's like a
No.
12-week kind of like course journal prompt. It's an incredible book. I'm on week 12 right now, so I'm on the tail end of it. And I've been really into just like the thought of creativity, and it's like a spiritual book too. And it basically says that like you are a creation from whatever you believe, God, whatever creator you think, but like living is the ultimate creation, and like creativity is your birthright, and it is like your job. Like that's what God put you here to. You are a creation. Your job is to continue to create. And similar to what you guys are talking about, that trip that you guys took where it was just like all of a sudden you have this giant business plan. I always refer to it as like a USB port just got plugged into my brain. And Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a book called Big Magic, and that's a big like part of my story. I was reading that book and I got the idea of Stylist Soul Tribe, and I knew it was a big magic idea. And the way she talks about these big magic ideas is basically ideas are energy and they kind of float around the ether. And when they find a host, it's that host's job to bring them to life. And if the host doesn't bring it to life, then it will eventually float and find a new host. And it was the same thing. It wasn't like I had to force it. I didn't have to really like think about what is this going to be. It just dropped in, not just like the name, the everything, like everything that I was going to create kind of dropped in. But I'm the same as you, Mindy, and this is what we were talking about. The words that I use when I get a big magic idea and when I coach other people to a big magic idea, and I think this is what we were talking about a month ago, is I always say, then you need to take fast, messy action. And I said that on a call last month, and Mindy was like, yeah, I always say it's ignorance on fire. And when she said ignorance on fire, I literally got like chills. And I was like, okay, why don't you guys come on the podcast? Because that alone, I want to talk about more. So I don't know who wants to go first, but like everything I just unpacked, that's all the thoughts that spun in my head a month ago when we were talking for a moment of like, let's expand on that. So one, what is ignorance on fire? Two, you almost have to chase these callings when they land on your heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been using that term since I got into real estate, because real estate's one of those industries that you go to school and you learn a bunch of crap that has nothing to do with what you actually do on a daily basis. And so you have to start working at a job that you actually have absolutely no idea what to do or how to do
Cosmetology
it.
school is very, like, it helps you pass state board, but you're not going to be good at anything you do, but you have a license.
It
so
doesn't
you don't hurt
relate to
anybody.
actually day to day. It doesn't teach you how to build a business. It doesn't teach you any of that. And so the reason I found success early on in real estate is because I am ignorance on fire, meaning I don't know what I don't know and I don't care. I'm just going to go and I'm going to figure it out along the way, and I'm going to trust the process, and I'm going to just assume that there's going to be people that come in to help me figure out what I need to figure out. And if I get stuck, I'll just keep going.
Motion.
Yeah. In fact, I was just up at a retreat and we did this activity, and one of the things was this game called tag, and it was T was for something you're thankful for, A is something you appreciate about yourself, and then G is something you're grateful for. And the T, what I'm thankful for, is I said I'm thankful that I never give up. Like no matter what, I just like have this inside of me to just keep going. And maybe I'll fail at something, but
it doesn't
won't
stop
me.
you.
It hardly slows me down. And so that was kind of how we approached the podcast too. And of course, we're big thinkers and big dreamers, and we assumed that by now we would be millionaires from this podcast. And that hasn't actually happened yet, but we'll keep going.
It's interesting because I have the same DNA wiring as you. It's not something that I can necessarily put into words. It's not something that I do intentionally. It's just always been there. And I do sometimes struggle with coaching people who don't have that.
Yeah.
And there's also something to be said for people who are more meticulous and thoughtful. But I'm the same as you, Mindy. Like, I just think action creates clarity and creates momentum, and just like running full speed ahead and figuring it out as you go. I have found from the people who live lives, whether they're millionaires from their podcast or not, but like when I'm in their presence and I'm having conversations with them and I'm like, yes, that's the similar lifestyle I want to live, or that's a similar mindset I want to have, that seems to be a common thread. How does that all land with you, Leslie? Are you the same, or are you a little bit different?
100%. I worked with someone long ago that always said 80% out is better than 100% in,
Yeah.
meaning release it when it's not perfect and figure it out along the way versus trying to perfect it and perfect it and perfect it, because you'll never put anything out. And so I definitely operate under that mindset. And I was just listening to his podcast over the weekend, and there was one that he was talking about fear. The message, essentially, if I had to summarize it in a couple of minutes, he was talking about like doing life scared, like do it fearful, do it scared. And if you can get to 51%, then just go. Then you have enough momentum to do the other 49% scared, and you figure it out along the way. And so to me, it reminds me of the same thing of we're never going to know all the things. That's impossible. And we can get paralyzed in our fear of what's to come, or paralyzed in our fear of it not being perfect, to the point where then we don't end up doing anything. And, you know, Mindy and I talk about that a lot, is the last thing that I want is to keep not doing things until I perfect them. And now all of a sudden I'm 80 years old and I never did the things.
Do you have like other examples? Obviously, the podcast is one of them. Do you have other examples of times you've implemented that? Either of you that wants to jump in, if an idea comes to mind, of just whether it's that ignorance or that doing it scared? Because I think sometimes people hear that, and sometimes it's like a big idea. It's bringing a business to life, but sometimes it truly is like a day-to-day, just kind of lifestyle almost.
I opened Instagram and there was this local farmer promoting their Sparrow Hill Farm food or meat subscription. They're like, we were farmers and we wanted clean meat and we couldn't find it. So we started farming, and I hit subscribe, and now I'm getting $200 worth of meat every single month. And I literally did this in the 5 minutes that I let my dogs out before I popped on the podcast. And then I was like, oh, I maybe should have given it a month or like sampled, but I don't. I just go. And then like if it sucks, I'll
You
cancel
deal with that
it.
later.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like so much, my niece, I've been borrowing her KitchenAid to see if I like it, because that's a big commitment.
I would like a KitchenAid too. I don't have one either.
And it's just they're expensive.
It's
so
a hard
anyways,
trick.
and I just learned that she's going to need it back, which I sort of figured because the holidays are coming.
Mhm.
And so I am having the biggest struggle buying a stinking stand mixer. It drives me nuts. I'd rather just throw money at something and move on with my life and just keep momentum going through things than getting stuck over which KitchenAid maker I'm supposed to buy for my sourdough.
But
I'd
did you
rather
see the
just
green one with the wooden bowl that's like
yeah, $700.
Because that one has been coming across my TikTok, and that is ridiculous, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah, but it doesn't. I read that it doesn't have a handle, and so it's getting some really big flack for that.
All right, fair.
I'm just telling. I've been doing some research, but it's like all of those little decisions, and you think about all of those little choices that we have to make in a day, and if you let yourself think through all of them, you're going to have decision fatigue before you make your coffee. So sometimes it's just like, yep, I need meat. I need clean, healthy meat. It's really hard to find. I'm subscribing. If it sucks, I lost $200 and I'll cancel.
So where's the fine line for you between discipline and ignorance on fire? Or does discipline not exist for you? Like, where do you know when to tap into that?
I think when it's a want versus a need is where I kind of like, okay, do you really need another new pair of blue jeans? Maybe
When
not.
you have 10,000, yeah.
You know, so it's more of like the meat thing. I think I just like acted because it's been it like activated my, what is it? Your reticular activating system, your RAS,
I
because
don't even know what that is.
I've been thinking about finding clean meat for probably a year now. I'm sick and tired of thinking about it and going to the grocery store and them not having the nitrate-free bacon I need or whatever. And so it's like, yes, I need clean meat. Done.
If there's a
Next.
solution to the problem, I'm not sitting
Yeah.
around, I'm taking it, I'm accepting it. I've been asking for this and I'm moving on to the next thing. Or else
Mhm.
you're dealing with the same problem for weeks, months, and then
Yeah.
eventually years, and we could have been so much further. I know that's what I wanted was a silly example because I think people just get so stuck in perfectionism.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to find the perfect combination of words and different people where eventually it hits the
Yeah.
right part of people's brains to push through that.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think it just everything is you can undo almost everything. Like even
Quite
like
literally.
I'm in the real estate industry. I'm like, if the house sucks, I can help you figure out how to sell it and not
True.
lose, right? Like you
Yeah.
can undo everything and people just do they get that decision fatigue, I think, because they
Mm.
don't take action.
And there is something to be said because some people would think buying a home is like a really big decision and like there's a lot of money on the line. So one of the biggest decisions you ever made. But there is something about making those small decisions with confidence, and not even confidence that it's the right decision, but that you'll figure it out along the way, that then lets you make bigger decisions that feel big at the moment, but eventually you make bigger
Mhm.
and bigger and bigger moves that those ones that you maybe wouldn't have even moved past wouldn't have allowed you to, it goes from buying a house to buying maybe a business. And had you not
Mhm.
experienced those slight discomforts, there's no way you could do that big jump. Yeah.
I think about like, who cares if it's wrong? Like, there's just as much to learn in being wrong than being right.
Mm,
And those wrong steps oftentimes get us, we learn the things that we learn from those wrong steps to get us back to the right ones. Or they help us change our path when
Mhm.
we realize, oh, maybe I didn't want to go that way and I took this wrong step and I learned something and now I'm going to completely shift where I was going to over here. I think about in a bigger example, I think about my career
mm,
in that way of, just kind of doing what feels right in the moment. And a lot of
yeah.
times people thought that I was making crazy decisions, but
Mm,
ultimately it worked. I mean, I think we all just need to be okay making the wrong decisions and not even
mm.
being okay making the wrong decisions, but embracing the wrong decisions and getting
Look for that
excited to
sometimes.
make the
Yeah.
wrong decision.
Mm.
Yeah. Because I think then you think about the step in an entirely different way. It doesn't feel quite as scary.
I think that's such a good lesson. And I really think somebody listening, and this is what's going through my head right now as well, is like if you can't remember the last time you had a pretty strong fail, then that probably tells you you're playing it way too safe. Because
Mhm.
you always kind of need to be right on the cusp of that, or else who knows what's being left on the table, I feel.
Yeah, it's risk
Mhm.
reward.
Mhm.
You know, we always hear that.
Another thing you wrote, Mindy, when you were filling this out for talking points was mindset. And obviously, I talk about mindset all the time. We're doing that right now, but don't waste the struggle. What does that mean to either of you, both of you?
That I feel like is almost how the podcast started. It's how
Okay.
Mindy and I really connected. That November weekend that Mindy mentioned when we first started was us, I think, both taking a risk in a new way of having friendship. And
Mm,
when we went away for a weekend, we both just spilled our guts and said, here's who I am, take it or leave it. And
mm,
that foundation to our friendship has made it stronger than ever. And some of the things that we shared that weekend were really hard things that normally
Mhm.
I think both of us would have kept closed in order to not show that side of us. So
mm,
we
Totally.
presented ourselves in a really different way and found that it actually really helped our friendship. And so I think it just got us thinking about the struggles that we have been through, not only sharing them, but like there's you can be proud of them. They shape you into the person that you are. They help find your path. They help you
mm.
make the right decisions and the wrong decisions. And so it's not this thing to be
The high.
shameful of.
Hmm.
Instead, use them for purpose and allow them to help you define your path moving forward. I know one of the things that I talked about at the very beginning is for a long time as struggle happened, I just kept putting walls up and
Mm.
avoidance. I'm just
Containing
they
each
are
struggle. Uh-huh.
exactly, they are deflecting me. They're from my path. I just need to keep going. The goal is straight ahead and I'm just going to block all of these things around me. But then I got to that goal and recognized like the goal isn't my goal anymore
Mm.
because all of these things that happened along my life were shifting me away from the path that I was going on and the person that I was becoming, but I didn't listen to them. And so
Mm.
that like finding purpose in that struggle is really that of like allow them to change your
Mm.
path. it's a good thing. You're
Yeah.
changing as a person, the more struggle
Having
that you go
faith
through.
that is meant to be in front of you to grow you into who you're meant to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I also think, and this is another thing that we really have felt strongly about our podcast from the very beginning, is that not wasting the struggle is also the way in which we connect on a deep level with other people. Like Leslie said, that's why you would never know that we've only been friends for a couple years or whatever, because we showed up as like, listen, this is all my truths. Like, I just can't, I don't have the energy to go into another relationship and pretend like I have it figured out. I don't. I'm a mess right now, and this is what I have going on. And then Leslie's like, okay, my turn. And we both showed up with like everything on the table. And then we were like, okay, she's not leaving me. She's not running away from me because I'm broken. And so we run from our struggles also because we're afraid that they're going to cause this cavern between other people, when really it's so sad, because our struggles are what actually connect us to one another. And so we've just always felt that's why we're so vulnerable about the stuff that we talk about on our podcast, because we're like, we know that other people are going through similar things, or they can relate to the feelings that we're having about the situation that we're in or whatever. And we just want everybody, like, we want to connect people. We want to build a community of women and or men that know that like their brokenness is not bad. It's not, there's nothing wrong with them. And in fact, it can be the way in which they can relate and really connect on such a deeper level with other people. So not only do those struggles do everything Leslie said, like absolutely, they like really help us learn where we're supposed to actually go in this world and this journey, but then they also bring us all together.
They're like a magnetic field, if you allow people to see it, that can grow those relationships stronger. This wasn't even the route that I was thinking about going talking point wise, but now that I'm hearing you guys talk about the way your friendship has started, I kind of want to pause for a minute and talk on this specifically, because my whole business and mission and what I've created is creating connections. And because the riches are in the niches, or you're supposed to niche down or whatever, like I happen to make an impact on hairstylists because that's what I do by trade. But like in the grand scheme of everything, I just feel that my superpower is connecting others. I've been that way since I was a child. I've found a way to turn that into a business. So you're saying you went into this friendship so intentional. And I want to ask, did you both just know that going in? Did somebody talk about it? Because I think making friends as adult women is not easy. And that's really like what I've created. It really is a version of just finding that friendship, that companionship, people that understand you in a way that maybe your husband or your sister or your close friends that have known you for a long time maybe don't. But I think it's really hard for women to make friends as an adult. So like, who spoke that into existence first? Who really pushed to create this friendship? Because I find that if you just are very passive, it's hard to like form something as deep and sacred and special as what you two have. So it had to have been a little bit intentional.
Yeah, I think we both went into that weekend knowing, because I was actually at a point in my life where I was going through some really tough stuff.
And you needed a friend.
Well, I didn't have the capacity to bring a new friend into my circle without them just knowing everything. And so I was like, this is the only way that I can show up to this friendship. And I think Leslie was like, same.
Yeah.
But I kind of went into it knowing, like when you're dating and you have to have like a kid conversation or something, like you have this big issue that you have to, I was kind of like, okay, I want to do this, but you have to know everything. And I have to trust that you're not going to just judge me and or be afraid of all the crap that I have going on in my life right now. And so I'm like, I just take it or leave it. Like, this is what I have and this is what I'm going through. And I just laid it all out. And it was, so yeah, I think that I mean, at least I know I can't speak for Leslie, but I knew going into that weekend, like, this is the weekend I'm going to have the talk with her and I'm going to tell her all the crap that's going on in my
so,
life.
how did you go from cheer mom friends to this like deep weekend conversation? Because that's a gap right there that maybe you didn't realize you were in. Leslie, do you have thoughts on that?
I'm like trying to think back to that time, and part of it I think is timing. You know, Mindi talks about she was in a really hard season of her life, and I was in the season of my life where I had gotten to that goal that I referenced earlier, and I was miserable. And so I think we were both just in a place where it's like, what have I got to lose at this point? And that mindset, I don't, it's like, I don't know, talking about like manifested it into being. I think that our energies, as silly as that sounds, were just like I don't know, it just
were
was
meant to find
there.
each other in
Yeah,
that
it
exact
just
time.
happened.
Well, and we did have, our friendship had escalated. Prior to that, we had been on, I think, a vacation at that point. And we had like our daughters are in competitive cheer, so we're gone for
I did
weekends at a
competitive
time.
cheer, so I do know that
You
world.
know, yeah. So we kind of like at one point decided like, oh, well, we should hang out together during these kind of cheer
May as
weekends.
well.
And then I think we did a trip together or whatever. And so we'd started to just talk more and more about things. And then Leslie would say something and be like, oh, me too. And I would say something and she'd be like, yeah, me too. As we just got to know each other through cheer and through just spending all these weekends and stuff together, like, wow, we have a lot in common. And the things that we have in common, I feel like are some of those things that you don't have in common with everybody. It's like those really strong drives and motivation and all the some of those things in our careers that we have in common. You don't necessarily find with all of your friends or your friends from growing up or whatever. My husband always referenced that movie where did we just become best friends?
Brothers.
Yeah, brothers. It was moment after moment like that. Me too. Like,
and I
want to play drums.
fully believe in soulmate friendships as well. It does just sound like you guys really saw each other and kind of knew, and that you had that continual. It's hard making friends as adults, and sounds like maybe if it weren't for cheer, it wouldn't have gotten to that level and that
yeah, probably not
deep bond that you two have. But I'm so grateful that you guys have found that, because I think there's a lot of lonely women out there, I mean, you have a lot of friends, but it's really hard. And I think going back to what you guys said of the don't waste the struggle, like, I don't know if it's social media that has caused it. I don't know what it is, but a lot of people will just really keep a lot of that to themselves and feel horribly lonely. And what I think my purpose here is just sometimes just creating that space. Like so many times I plan retreats. My full-time job is creating connections with people, and I'll get in my own head. My ego will start talking and say like, oh, you need to create a workshop. You need to teach something. You need to hear it. And time and time and time again, I'm just taught like, no, Lisa, you simply just need to create a space. That is all women need. Like 99% of the time is just a space to be seen, a safe space that makes sure they're not going to get stomped all over and, all those fears that come up. And that's magical, truthfully. It really is.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think we're all trying really hard to find those connections and find those relationships. And we're trying so hard at it that we're showing up as who we think people want us to show up as, our true selves, out of fear of judgment and thinking that that's going to help us find the friend out there, when in reality, all that's doing is pushing us further and further away from finding that real friend.
Because then all these people are putting on their masks too. And then you find yourself with a lot of people around me, but I sure do feel lonely and nobody even really sees me for who I am.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good stuff. All right. I had another talking point. Staying curious in the pursuit of finding purpose. What comes up for either of you with that specifically?
You want to go first or you want me to?
I think staying curious, somehow I think we just kind of organically coined that phrase. I think it's our exit line, but staying curious. I think we are both working really, really hard at being present. And again, I don't want to speak for Mindi, but in this pursuit of being present is asking a lot of questions. Like, why do I feel the way that I feel right now? Or why do I feel uncomfortable? Or why do I feel nervous? Or why do I just feel joyful right now? And being really aware of what our bodies are feeling and how our bodies are reacting in certain situations has helped me get closer to the version of me that feels most authentic in the world. And I think it's just an endless pursuit. That's where that word comes from, is I don't think you ever like just all of a sudden are like,
there's no finish line.
Here I am, I've arrived. Yeah, but it's just really paying attention. I think we're so quick to just fly through our days as fast as we possibly can, wishing for the weekend to get here and missing 5 days in the meantime. And so if we can just really pay attention to how we are showing up and feeling in the world, there's signs and clues that are happening every single day in the most simple things that are helping us direct ourselves to our real being. You have to be intentional about finding them and listening.
I love that so much. And I want to know, just for you, Leslie, specifically, like putting that actually into action and into place. Is this just a mindfulness? Is this just constantly running in the back of your mind, this curiosity? Is this checking in with a friend? Is that when your moments of curiosity really bubble? Having someone to almost hold a mirror up and ask you those questions? Is it journaling for you? Is it prayer? Is it meditation? What is it for you? How do you practice that
I
curiosity?
think for a while, I tried to force it into journaling, or I tried to force it into meditation, and would feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to figure this out. I can't be consistent
Just
with
checking
it.
a box.
Like,
Yep.
I was checking a box and it felt hard. And so I just kind of dropped it. But it was in the moments where I'm like, no, as I'm getting ready in the morning, like it feels really good to sit and make a cup of coffee while staring out the window. So I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah,
And
I'm going to notice that. Be
I'm gonna
curious of
notice.
what that is.
I don't think it needs to be this like significant, like I'm going to set my alarm early and get up and do 15 minutes of meditation. I don't have the patience for that. I've never been good at it. And so I can figure out how to find those moments of reflection as I go through my day. And that's been a total game changer for me, was that final realization of I don't need to journal. That's for some people. It's just not for me. And
it's a state of mind and an
Yeah.
inner dialogue, it sounds like, for you.
Yes, exactly.
Mindy, did you have major thoughts on staying curious in the pursuit of finding purpose, or is it the same as Leslie?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the same ideas. And I think for me, part of it is I've been on a health journey because I had some health issues that I needed to deal with. And so I believe that, like, if we stuff down emotional trauma or past, hardships emotionally, that our physical body can't heal. And so in this like sort of desperation to heal my physical body, I've learned that I need to be really curious about those like ruminating thoughts. And so for me, it's been intentional, like Leslie said, like being present. And when those thoughts come up, instead of trying to shove them back down, my curiosity, it tends to go to like, I ask myself, and I ask other people now too. I was at this retreat, like I said, I'm kind of embarrassed by the amount of questions I asked, but I've learned that I have, through this practice that Leslie and I have been doing and we talk about on the podcast, I have genuinely become a very curious person about, why am I having that thought? Why does that thought keep coming up? Like, asking myself all of these things. For me, I do like to journal. So journaling them and getting them out, and then just continuing like the curiosity, like now where? Like, it's just, I'm constantly following these rabbit trails, just trying to figure life out.
It really, what I'm hearing is that like curiosity is a core value for both of you. And I'm asking myself if that is one for me, or that's something I'm going to be mindful of, like curiosity being like that. That is who I am. That's who I will always be. That's something I will always fall back on. And you realize quickly that is happening for a reason, and what it uncovers really shapes.
Yeah, I have
who
one
you
quick
are.
good example that might help kind of put this into context. So because I've shared I'm an Enneagram 3, everything's got to be like perfect. I stopped running several years ago because it started messing with my head. Like, I was never fast enough. It wasn't enough miles. I just started really getting miserable about it. And one day I was out walking. I used to walk very regularly, and I was really freaking bored. And so I just started asking myself questions about running. Like, why did you hate it? And like, and then I would come up with that answer. And then I would ask another question, and I'd be like, well, what if you sorry, my dogs are, what if the goal was to run as slow as you possibly could, instead of running as fast as would you enjoy it more then? And so I literally had this full-blown conversation
Like,
with
you
myself.
coached yourself.
Yes, about the curiosity I had about, why did I stop and why did I hate it? Because at one point I loved running. And so I just went through this whole cycle, and now I'm running again. And so I was able to coach myself through that And running for me, like, it's when I get, like, you talk about magic moments, like, that's when the magic moments, like, arrive for me. And so, and I know Leslie's the same. She's
I
training
like
for
running
marathon.
too.
And so I missed that part of it. You don't get the same endorphins, you don't get the same chemical responses from walking as you do running. And so there was a component that I missed. And so just me asking myself all of these questions about running, I got myself back into running, and I'm really enjoying it more than I've ever enjoyed it in my entire life.
And I really think that's the layer of going to self-healing or whatever you want to call it. We have all these, buzzwords, but like getting to a point, I think curiosity is the answer to that of I'm bored, my body's itchy, it's craving something. You were craving running. And
Yeah.
you're like, what is this? What is happening in my body right now? Being aware enough of what something's happening. What is this that's happening? Asking yourself. And to me, that really is almost like a spiritual thing. Like, because to me, I'm like, are you talking to yourself? Are you talking to your creator? Are you talking to the highest version of yourself? Not that we need to unpack all of that, but it is really fascinating. That's then how we get to the point. And of course they'll hit roadblocks and you'll hit things that your tools in your toolbox you don't have the ability to solve them yet, and you'll need to outsource that to others. But I do think I think curiosity, you're right, is really one of those tricks or core values or something to take on to get to the point of self therapy, self-healing, self-coaching, whatever you want to call it. Fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
Great conversation, ladies. I knew it was going to be good. I know it's weird getting on with people you hardly know, but I'm just telling you, I've said it so many times on this podcast. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have a reason. Why else would we have just a deep ass conversation like this, other than if we were recording it? So I'm just so grateful. And to Carissa, who made this connection, thank you. And to everybody who ever listened, if you ever feel super called to either of these ladies' stories, I'm sure they would be open to expanding on another conversation and just staying curious and having these connections. Or if there's somebody else that you would think that I would connect with, well, I'm very open to those conversations because I had no idea the route this was going to go. I was a little bit nervous. It's a little nerve-wracking talking to people you have no idea what you're about to say, who they are, what they have going on, but what beautiful gems we unpacked there. I love it.
Thanks for having us. This was really fun.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So obviously I can leave the podcast in the show notes, the Banyan Effect podcast. You can find it on all places that podcasts are, but I will also link it. Is there anything else I can link your guys' Instagram? Any other ways to find you if somebody really feels drawn to something that either of you said?
Well, for now, it's our personal Instagrams.
Okay.
Which we can share with you. But I also wanted to share too that we do have an episode on adult friendships. So if anybody wants to go deeper on that, we can link that episode because we know that that's not something that's necessarily easy for people.
Yeah, I'll definitely link that. Well, thank you, ladies, for both of you. Really
Yeah.
great getting to know both of you. I love just kind of collecting these new friendships along the way. So it was really great connecting with both of you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Like I said, all the info will be in the show notes, and I will talk to you all next week. Bye.